The witness commences. I may need to leave during the course of the next 2 hours, and I won't be back until Tuesday morning. Mr. Bowe will appear on behalf of the Brown family, instructed by Ms. Naz.
Thanks, Mr. Miles.
I'll ask you some questions about what happened after the events or the deployment on the 9th. I understand that you contacted Zach Rolfe or had contact with Zach Rolfe on 3 occasions following the shooting on the 9th of November.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
The first occasion was you checked in on him to see how he was on the 10th of November. You spoke to him outside his house. I think he was on the front porch.
I spoke to him before that. When he came back to Alice Springs, I went and seen him at the hospital.
Okay, you were a part of that.
Yeah, I went up to the hospital, yeah.
Okay. You then saw him on Sunday, the 10th of November, outside his house.
Correct.
That was a welfare check.
Yeah.
The third time you had contact with him was when you went around to Zach's place for drinks. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Now, your evidence was that it was just police members who were there.
Yeah.
I want to ask you some questions about how that came about. Can I ask you to have a look at some text messages sent and received on the 10th and 11th? Do you want to just briefly familiarise yourself with the first and second page?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Just the first and second?
Just the first and second
Yep.
page.
Yep.
If you turn back to the first page, you'll see that at about 6:58 p.m. on the 10th of November, you texted Zach Rolfe and said, "Is anyone free for an IRT debrief tomorrow at around 4:30 p.m. At IRT office? I'll bring the beers and let Adam and Jimmy know."
Yeah.
Adam is Jimmy Bell.
Yes.
Jimmy is Jimmy
Kirstenfeld, yeah.
Okay. And the IRT office is where?
It's beside the watch house.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did you propose to discuss at the debrief?
It's really just a welfare. It's I think I was more mindful that Zach lived alone. I didn't, obviously what happened, it would have been very traumatic for everyone. I think it was just really just to make sure, see how he's travelling.
Okay. Is there a reason that you organised that and not someone else?
Yeah, probably.
Could that have something to do with the fact that it had been your responsibility to send the members out to Kimberley on the 9th of November?
No, I think it was more of a, I don't really know. Were
you acting in a leadership role?
No, I can, if you, so how can I put this? There's not many people know this about me. When the incident happened, Zach was 29. When my brother killed himself, he was 29. And nobody knows that about me. And I'm not saying Zach exhibited anything like that, but I find welfare, especially with young people, very important.
I just want to say, I'm not going to be suggesting to you that you were trying to do anything inappropriate.
Yeah, no, that's cool.
I'm not going to be suggesting to you that you had anything but Zach's best interests at heart.
Yeah.
At that stage, were you aware what, if any, other welfare support was being provided to?
I don't think any was being provided. We've had quite a major review, probably in this year, about the welfare support we receive, and it was found to be lacking, which the organisation is doing good things about it. I'm currently a peer support officer, so what I'll do is I'll go around and make sure everyone's okay. Like, predominantly my role is when I go around, and if it's a personal matter or work matter, I try not to get them to talk about that.
Yeah.
I'm not a psychologist. It's not like they can dump on me. I'd much rather try and go for a walk, go for a run, go to the gym. Yeah. But I know we had a review and it has been found to be lacking.
So at that time, you were concerned that there were no other welfare supports being offered to Zach from the organisation.
Yeah.
And you were providing peer support.
Yeah, and also is that it's kind of, because it's so important, do you leave it, do you bank on other people are doing it when I can do it?
Responsibility,
So
you thought that it could be lacking and you did not want to leave that gap.
yeah, like at the end of the day, he's gone home to an empty house. I'm not saying there was any suggestion or anything. I'm just,
But you were aware of possibilities and you were concerned.
well,
As it just generally.
yeah, everything goes through your mind, and I think from my own personal experience, yeah.
One of the reasons there's had to be a review, can I suggest to you, is that there's a real tension in situations like this. Obviously, as an investigator, you accept that it's important that the independence and objectivity of evidence be maintained.
I totally agree, yeah.
But on the other hand, as a senior officer and as a human being, you have a moral obligation to young men like Zach Rolfe to ensure that they are okay. And it's fair to say that fulfilling those two roles is not easy.
No.
Because obviously there's a relationship between the trauma that all of the IRT members must have experienced on the 9th of November and their accounts of what happened.
I understand how this looks, Your Honour. I do, and I apologise. It was definitely not my intention.
Sorry, I just didn't hear that. No.
I understand how it looks. I apologise. It was my intention.
Thank you.
And had there been a proper structure in place that you were confident was providing support?
I wouldn't have had to do it.
In effect, your evidence is you weren't trying to do the wrong thing,
No.
but you accept that there's a risk.
Oh, yeah,
when everyone
definitely.
gets together and
Yeah.
drinks alcohol.
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to clarify your recollections of what happened at the barbecue. Do you recall what time you turned up?
I know my wife dropped me off. Pretty sure it was still daylight, maybe 5.
And did you leave in the daylight or leave after?
Well, it gets dark quite quick in Alice. I think my wife probably came, picked me up. I think my daughter was at dance, so they both came around. Could have been about 7:30.
Can you recall?
And 7:30, 6:30.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay. So you were there for maybe an hour.
An hour, yeah, an hour and a bit, yeah.
Can you recall any discussions in your presence at the barbecue about the events of the night?
No. Because being a peer supporter, I'm very like you mean. Okay, I don't know what everyone's saying all the time, but I say to people, I say if you're not getting paid, don't talk about work in general. So I know if I did hear it, I would have told them to, but I can't recall. So
In fairness to you, I think that an officer who's given evidence this week, Adam Eberl, started talking about work and you said, oh, don't talk about that.
okay.
Your Honour,
Yes, Mr. Sutner?
I'm terribly sorry to interrupt this examination, but I'm finding increasingly that Mr. Coleridge, I don't know if he's standing away from his microphone, but I'm not hearing him, and I imagine that if I'm not hearing him, then other people who are listening in are not hearing him. If I could just urge him through you, Your Honour, to request him to stand closer to the mic so that we can actually hear his question. Thank you.
I'm sure he's happy to do that on your request, Mr. Sutner.
How's
Thank you, Your Honour.
How's this, Mr. Sutner?
That's much better, thank you, Mr. Coleridge, but can I tie your feet to the floor there, please?
Understood.
Thank you.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about, and these are not criticisms, they're
Sure.
just
Yeah.
questions that
are designed to identify things that can be fixed in systems.
Yeah.
Would you agree that a command structure that doesn't clearly identify who is responsible for briefing the members of the IRT needs some work so that things are clearer and the responsibilities of everyone in the chain of command are clearer?
Oh, definitely. I think there's definitely things we can learn from this. Yeah.
For example, Superintendent Nobbs, I suspect his evidence is that he thought he was calling you and entrusting you to brief the members of the IRT.
Yeah.
Senior Sergeant Sean Gill thought that his only job was to call you into his office effectively.
Sean Finesse.
Sean Finesse. And similarly, you thought that you were really a point of contact.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that, at least in Alice Springs, it's very difficult to identify who was actually in charge.
In charge in relation to the deployment?
In relation to briefing the IRT in Alice Springs.
I could probably... I don't know how to answer that, sorry.
I think it's a matter for submissions. But are you aware now that in the standard operating procedure, there are some paragraphs that deal with eligibility for membership of the IRT?
I don't know, okay. But I'll take that there is, yes.
I'm not going to take you to them, but it would make sense that the standard operating procedure provided that if you were being performance reviewed, you might not be eligible for membership.
Yeah, if that's what it says.
Or if you were being investigated or you were the subject of a disciplinary sanction, you might not be eligible.
If that's what it says, yeah.
Do you think that one of the things that went wrong in this case is that no one really asked, are all of these members of the IRT suitable for deployment?
No, I think it's more like if there is instances like that, there should be a clear notification saying that this person shouldn't go on deployments until this has been resolved.
I'm not saying that the problem lies with you. I'm just asking whether, there should be something in the system like.
Oh, of course, yeah. I'll agree that should be some way of notification. But then you also have to be careful who, and identify who's actually making that decision. Then the the criteria for not being available. Yeah. I think that would be quite important. Okay. Because I can understand complaints against police, but there's different levels of complaints against police.
What if a police officer was being investigated for the crime of perjury?
I don't know. It would never come to me to sort out that decision of what would be and wouldn't be suitable.
Would you agree, though, that at some level in the chain of command, someone should consider whether or not the officer is suitable for deployment?
If that's part of SOPs, is it part of SOPs?
Certainly.
I think that probably I get it with the SOPs. I understand what you're saying, but there really should be criteria around what it is, because you then have to make sure that one person who gets this investigation is treated the exact same way as this person, so there's no favoritism and nepotism.
So there just needs to be clear criteria for eligibility.
Yeah. Well, enough for eligibility to say that this person is on hold or not for call-outs because of this reason.
Yeah. Just in fairness, you gave some evidence about the circumstances in which you might have sent the text about the axe incident footage.
Yeah.
The body-worn video logs show that you accessed the body-worn video of Lanyon Smith at 3:28.
Okay.
Which looks like it was 9 minutes before you sent the text.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Bowe.
Thank you, Your Honour. Senior Constable, my surname is Bowe and I appear for the Walker, Lane and Robertson families.
Hello, sir.
The there's a number of propositions I'm going to take you to in a minute, which might shorten my questioning. But before that, can I just clarify at least my understanding of the way in which you understood the IRT could be deployed in the manner that you were called upon to do so?
Yeah.
My understanding was that you viewed membership of the IRT as being a part-time resource that may be available for deployment when there were particular needs in other areas than which those people were scheduled to be on duty, correct?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, and in that respect, the qualification they had was the 2-week induction course and the monthly training in relation to shooting.
Yes, there also was a review process before they even got to that stage.
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not querying the qualification process, but insofar as what they brought to the equation was, one, likely to be more readily available because they had put their name up to be readily available, correct?
Yeah, that would be a criteria.
And
yeah.
two, they were known to have particular training behind them, and that could be utilised for particular services, correct?
Yes.
And they were, if they were going to be using their specialist skills, and I mean the shooting skills and going into housing skills, it was only meant to be a temporary hold until those far more qualified and trained could attend, like the TRG.
Yes, in some scenarios.
Yeah, but with the caveat that if urgent circumstances arose, they could be deployed.
Correct.
Is that correct? Right. So, insofar as your role on the 9th, the difficulties that you faced were, one, you had never been in that role before, correct?
Correct.
And you had not really understood, whilst you were doing it, that you were being asked to do or expected to do more than being a conduit. And can I explain conduit?
I understand conduit.
May I
Well-
just contextualise the question
sorry.
so it's easier for
Yep.
you? That is, you had assumed that the decisions to deploy had been made by others higher above you, correct?
Correct.
And that they would have had some liaison with the party seeking the assistance, namely Frost.
Yes.
And that between the two of them, they would at some stage formulate the plan for any of the duties that these members would be undertaking upon their deployment, correct?
Yes.
Your task was, even though you were given quite a lot of information, was simply to assemble 4 people who were able to attend at the time you thought they were needed.
Yes, and to identify what equipment
Yes.
they would take and let obviously Julie Frost know about that. Yeah.
As to that second issue, that would be informed a lot by what they would ultimately be doing, correct?
No.
It may be a staged process. An assumption might be made. This is where, if I may say, you corrected Councillor Sissing by saying from the IRT instead of sending an IRT.
Yeah.
You were trying to, I thought, communicate that you were looking at who was available from the IRT pool to be deployed, correct?
Correct.
And one thing you were wanting to be clear about was whether it was a green mission or a blue mission.
Yeah.
And once you were told it was a blue mission, you didn't want to second guess that. You simply communicated that to anybody that ultimately agreed to be involved.
Correct.
Okay. Now, just dealing just briefly with what you thought to be the limits of your responsibilities was that once you had identified and had the agreement of those willing to be deployed and given them the general information of what they should take, you assumed that once they got to Yuendamu, that the officer in charge and perhaps somebody higher would then refine the plan for them, correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Now, so would one issue, looking backwards, that you would like addressed in terms of findings or recommendations would be that if it was expected that you, in that position that you were in deploying the IRT, was to be an engaged, dynamic process of showing leadership and defining the plan, that any other duties you had at that time should be pushed away from you so you could focus on this particular task of deployment and engaging with the changing needs in the situation.
So are you saying that I should have, when this call came in and I was taking the role, you're asking, should I have just solely had the opportunity to work on that and not the posse?
Well, I'm suggesting to you that in order to do all the things that everybody seems to be expecting you should have done, you should have been given the space and time to do that with focus.
More resources would have definitely been better.
Yeah, that is, whoever's doing that task of identifying, for example, team leader, what equipment, making sure everybody was on the same page, should be left to be able to do that uninterrupted by worrying about whether or not somebody had their drinks break at the local pub.
Yeah.
You'd accept that, wouldn't you?
I'd accept that. You'd still be limited to what information you had at that time when you called them in. So it's not like if they wanted 4 people to go, you could turn around and isolate someone to organise that role, because sometimes that role could be a minor role or a large role. Am I making something clear? Because at that stage we kind of didn't have the information to give them. So it's not like when they were called in, I withheld information because I was too busy. I just didn't have what they were going to do, and that's why the information was go see Julie Frost.
Well, you can see what's happened in this case, don't you? I mean, you know, we have a lot of information of people's different recollections of what they said, what they were told, what they wrote down, etc. I mean, one way to cut through all that or improve that is to make sure that the person who was deploying and being viewed by those above and below as being responsible for the deployment would have the ease of mind to be able to sit down and write down what they had been told by Nobs on the phone, make sure that that accurately reflected what you understood from Frost, and that accurately reflected what you communicated to those you were deploying. Surely that's really what's happened here, isn't it?
I could think that could be recorded via email.
Yes, well, I'll get to that email in a second. Now, just dealing briefly, before I go to those propositions, the training on a monthly basis was focused upon, as I understand it, 2 specific things: improving weapon use, correct?
You mean improving handling?
Well,
or?
I don't know what language you want to use, but
Yeah.
part of it was about using your guns.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And the other part was entering buildings in particular situations.
Yes.
Correct? I think one of the examples, like you go out to some abandoned housing sites and use those places to set up scenarios, etc.
Somewhat, sorry.
Set up scenarios at abandoned buildings.
Yes,
etc.
yes.
When insofar as that component, the crafting of what exercises you did, was that by Sergeant Bowens?
It was, and also Constable Bevan used to assist as well.
And were those exercises recorded by video and the like?
I don't think so.
Like body-worn cameras and the like?
No, because it was just training, so...
Training, okay. I just wanted to get a sense of what the training was like. Did it involve, for example, having cutouts of civilians and targets, etc.?
For the firearms range, yes, you have a cardboard target. You have to hit something, so...
Yes.
Yeah.
And did that involve making sure that people don't hesitate from shooting if they have to shoot?
Well, when you're on the firearm range, your whole goal is to fire the firearm. It's a firearm range. We did do... Well,
Is it speed and accuracy?
it is, like, sometimes it's you kind of get caught, like you'll be walking along the range. You have to be obviously mindful of your arc of fire, but you'll be walking along.
Sorry, it may be my
Arc
listening.
of
Oh,
fire.
sorry.
Arc of fire.
Arc of fire.
Yeah.
And you walk a little bit and they go up and then you bring it up. It's to try and get you away from planting your feet and just shooting, because, you know, life isn't like that. You're not going to have the time to plant your feet, bring it up, get a good aim on. It's to try and make it more reality based.
Okay. Did that answer your honest query? I just want to go to another point.
I think it is speed and accuracy, but it's also in a dynamic situation, not in a static situation.
That's how it should.
That's what I wanted to get to. Part of it was to simulate a real life scenario.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And look, I've never been in a situation of shooting at people.
Yep.
Do you find that some police have difficulty at the concept of shooting at another human?
I think all police would have. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is done to help you to be able to shoot at a human if you need to? What is done to train you or make you better equipped to do that?
I think you're not. So I can just speak personally. I don't think the idea was that I'm shooting at a human. Obviously, they'd be a human. I think I'm shooting to stop the threat that I see in front of me, that's presented to me. So I think that's the idea. And you're kind of, we use the word incapacitation, and you're just trying to stop them doing what they're doing for you to use it in the first place.
Yes. I mean, I want to just go to that. When you say you use the word incapacitation, that's to sort of, may I suggest, to desensitise what in fact is happening when you do shoot at another person. That is, you are shooting to kill another person.
No, we're not shooting to kill. We're not
Shooting to hit another person.
Well, you're shooting to stop them doing what they're doing.
Yeah. I mean, even this language, as we're using in this conversation,
Yeah.
is to make it easier to desensitise with some of the consequences of what you must do.
Yeah, but remember, you can incapacitate someone without a firearm.
Yes.
Like pepper spraying someone or tasing someone, I'd say they're incapacitated.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the shooting. at
Okay,
the
sorry,
moment.
yeah.
Okay. But the shooting has a potential lethal effect, correct?
Yeah, of course does, yeah.
And the language used that you just used is partly, if I may say, to desensitise what in fact you're doing. You're shooting at another human. You understand?
I wouldn't say the language used to sensitise, but I do understand the deeper, the depth of what you're saying. You are shooting at another human being. Yes, I would agree with that.
Yeah. You're being upskilled to be able to shoot if necessary. Something most of us may not have an experience or desire to do.
To be honest with you, I think with more training probably comes that you make a better decision that you don't have to shoot.
All right, I'll leave that for now. Insofar as given the role that you were taking, that meant that taking into account any local issues, events, conditions was not a matter of your concern at all, correct?
I wouldn't say I was, and it'd be rude to say I wasn't concerned about it, but it wasn't a priority for me because obviously I wasn't in the mood. Julie Frost was aware of the community, so I'd imagine that would have been left up to her.
Yeah, I'm not criticising you. I'm just saying it wasn't part of your decision making because you assumed.
I didn't mean to be disrespectful for
No,
what
no,
was going on.
of course, yeah. You're assuming that whatever resources the officer in charge had at Yuendamu, she would likely utilise to make the actions of your team appropriate.
Totally
correct?
agree.
Okay. Now, for that reason, when information was being given to you, which is recorded in the note, and I'm not going to have a memory test or anything about those matters, when you became aware that there was a funeral scheduled at that time, you assumed that the ultimate deployment from Yuendamu Station would take into account all relevant factors to that aspect of the information.
Did I assume? I can't say if I assumed.
You may not even thought about it.
Yeah.
Is that more the case?
Yeah, I didn't think about it.
But you're familiar with the notion that in some communities where an arrest is not urgent, it's okay or permissible to defer the arrest until after sorry business, for example.
Sorry, someone coughed. Did you say now urgent or non-urgent?
Non-urgent.
Okay. Sorry, you're going to have to repeat the question. Sorry.
That's okay. Deferring an arrest
Yep.
when it's not urgent until after, say, sorry business is over in the community. You're familiar with that concept?
Yeah.
But you would have hoped that would have been put into the decision making that others were doing as to what they did once your team got to Yuendamu.
I can't say I really thought about it.
So it wasn't even a thought that entered your mind.
No.
Was the idea of funeral just a bit of intelligence, perhaps, that might suggest that Kumanjayi would have been in the community to attend the funeral?
No, I think the idea of a funeral was probably being that you would have more people in community.
I see. That might explain that why there was a need for additional resources in the community.
I'm not too sure.
Police resources in the event that there's more people there that may need policing.
Funerals don't mean you get extra work out of it, so I don't really know how to answer that.
Right. Now, I want to give you 5 things that I have gleaned from the material that you have said you believed you had conveyed to the 4 IRT members before they left Alice Springs. The first was you made it clear that Sergeant Frost was in charge of them once they arrived in Yuendamu.
Yeah, she was OIC station,
Yeah, and that is both because of just command structure and rank, but also the purpose of the team going there is to do what the local officer in charge needed, correct?
Well, the fact is it's her community.
Yes.
I don't mean this any disrespect to the people who live in the community, but I know when I was a remote sergeant, if I had people, and I have had people come out and assist, they're only there to assist me. Do you get me?
Yeah. So the focus of the only task that you thought your team was to assist was in relation to the arrest of Kumanjayi Walker.
Yeah. That's what I told them, what they'd go out for.
Was there before, or even on this day, any conversation within IRT, either in training or in deployment, that sometimes what they are asked to do once they get there may be not something that they think is the best way to do it? Is that a subject of any conversation at any time?
No, and it hasn't been, no, never has been.
But if, from your mind, if, for example, there was any disagreement by any of the 4, you would have expected them to at least raise them with Frost or at least come back to you. Or did you see your function as being finalised once you'd sent them off?
Yeah, I'm not trying to minimise my role, but I just probably see my function as logistics. Get people, let Sergeant Frost know what equipment we
Understand.
had. Yeah.
Thank you for your candour. So you would have expected if they had any disagreement with Frost, they should go up to somebody like Nobbs.
Did they have a
If they did.
I don't know. I'd imagine if they had a disagreement, it possibly could come back to me, or they could have just maybe dealt with it there.
All right.
They're all like, you mean the four guys are quite easygoing, so.
Now, you've been taken through this before, so I'm only going to ask the question. You now understand that the email that Julie Frost circulated that afternoon, you received that after the team had left Alice Springs, correct?
Yeah, so I didn't originally receive it, and then she sent me an email saying she apologised, she forgot to send it to me, but yeah, I wasn't, sorry.
Yeah. But you did get it sometime in the afternoon of the 9th of November before the IR team arrived in Yuendamu.
Correct.
You'd be familiar.
Well, I don't know when they arrived, but they had definitely left.
Yes, but you know it's about a 3.5 hour drive.
Yeah.
And you also know that there's no internet connection for part of that journey.
Oh, for most of it, I'd say.
Yeah, and there's usually some pings on your email once you get to Tumouth Wells. You're aware of that? You've done that drive?
I've done the drive. Are you on about the pings on my work phone?
Right.
Mine's always muted or flash.
All right,
so.
let's not worry too much about that. The point being is, you received that email shortly after Frost sent it to you.
Yeah.
And you read it, I take it?
I have since read it. I can't say I read it at the time. I probably didn't read it at the time.
Okay. Did you know when it came that it was an email from Frost?
Oh, yeah, sure. I had a name in it. Yeah.
You saw it,
Yeah.
and you just didn't read it.
I replied to it, but as I said, I was, posse sergeant, so I replied to it.
Sorry, my listening to your...
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll speak up. Yeah, I replied to it, but I can't say I read it.
Yeah, you certainly hadn't absorbed it.
No.
Now, you might have skimmed through it, you saw what it was, you could see it being sent to others.
Yeah, you could obviously see the signature thing.
And you may have made an assumption that it had gone to everybody that needed to know the contents of it?
I don't think I made any assumptions about
No,
it.
is it more that you now recognise you should have absorbed it, but you didn't at the time? I'm not being critical of you.
Yeah, I know. I agree. In hindsight, yeah.
And the fact is, now that you know what the contents are, you now know that the contents, in fact, set out a fairly detailed plan for what the team was being deployed to do.
Yeah. Yes, I did read that.
And you would accept that in discharging your duties of deploying the IRT team, you should have made sure positively that the 4 people you were sending had read and understood that document.
So after they arrive in Yuendamu,
Now, once you got it, right?
yeah,
I know you've acknowledged you didn't read it. You acknowledge you should have, correct?
I did eventually read it, but yeah, okay,
Well, look, you've just sent 4 people out,
yeah,
and you may not like the language, but they are militarised in the sense they are using weapons ordinary police don't usually use in communities, correct? It's a serious deployment of firepower.
yeah.
AR-15s, shotguns, long arms.
Yeah, a lot of stations have that.
Well, but it's a serious deployment, isn't it?
Sorry, I'm kind of confused.
All right. You don't doubt for a moment, do you, that given that deploying an IRT can only be done by approval of an assistant commissioner, correct?
Correct.
That would suggest the seriousness of the deployment, correct? That you need somebody as high up as assistant commissioner to approve
I'll
it.
agree with that.
Okay. So you having been the conduit for this particular IRT team and now having received an email which set out the detailed plan, surely you recognise that you had a responsibility to make sure the men you sent out knew what that document said.
No, I disagree.
Well, you think they should have been kept in the dark about what the operational orders were?
No, I don't think they should be kept in the dark, but as I said to them, go out and see Sergeant Frost.
So why do you think Sergeant Frost sent you the email?
Well, she originally didn't send it to me, and then she did.
She sent it to you, did she not? Because she'd been told by Nobbs to use you as the point of assembling the IRT team that were coming to see her.
I don't know.
But I guess it's a little bit hypothetical, but in the sense, now that you've read the detail of that email, surely you accept that that was important, necessary information that those members needed to have before they did anything in Yuendamu.
So I accept if it was important. Yeah, it was important.
There was no point that information stopping at you, was there?
I don't know what you mean.
Well, it was important not just for you to know of it, but for the people doing the job knowing about it. Sure.
I'd imagine there's a presumption that would have been delivered in a briefing by Sergeant Frost at Yuendamu.
So you made that assumption.
I made that assumption, yeah.
Thank you.
It's what I would have done if I was remote sergeant.
But looking forward, Senior Constable, I know you're serious about your interest in policing. These sorts of breakdowns, as you can see here, have had some catastrophic effects. Surely you regret not making sure that those 4 people you sent out got that email.
I don't really think whether I regret it or not.
All right.
I agree that what happened was unfortunate.
And that the fact that it didn't happen was a failing.
No.
All right, thank you, Don.
Mr Mullins.
Thank you, Your Honour. Senior Constable, my name is Mullins. I act on behalf of the Brown family.
Hello.
Just a few questions. Firstly, I couldn't quite pick up what your other role was on Saturday the 9th.
I was point of I forgot what I Posse, yeah. Point of sale inspector. So the auxiliaries, police auxiliaries, who obviously do named checks and address checks at bottle shops. So we have 12 bottle shops in Alice Springs. So we make sure we have 14 people because the drive-thrus are busy, so we'll have them 2 up. So my duties are to obviously look after all of them, make sure the welfare is taken care of, make sure we have the support cage. They'll obviously, checks come over the radio because obviously you're limited in what checks you can do in your iPad. But yeah.
And so what's the support cage?
The support cage is 2 constables that will go around and replace batteries, supply water, but also it's quite common for the parley members to actually deal with quite abusive people. So support cage will generally go around and may move people on, may arrest people. That's what it is.
And does a constable have to undergo training to take that role?
No, it's still policing.
And is there a standard operating procedure for that role?
For the role of support cage or the liquor inspector?
Both.
There would be I would imagine point of sale intervention would have a standard operating procedure.
And is it the case that in the Northern Territory Police there are a raft of standard operating procedures for particular tasks?
Yes.
And what is the interface between the general orders and the standard operating procedures? As in, what takes precedence?
I think standard operating procedures, but don't quote me on that.
And in your role with the posse and your supervision of the point of sale staff, is it the case that you consult the standard operating procedures to give them instruction?
No. Well, when you say consultant, am I consulting at the start of each shift or?
Well, are you familiar with the standard operating procedures?
No, not that I can recall. It's been a couple of years since I did it.
And you don't use the standard operating procedures to guide you in how you manage?
No.
You've had the opportunity to look at the standard operating procedures in respect of the IRT now,
Yep.
And you've got a copy in front of you?
Oh, yes. Let me just go back to it. Yep, got it.
And if you can turn to page 5 at paragraph 1.2.2,
Yep.
we can see there's reference to debriefing. And it says debriefs will be completed and documented at the conclusion of each operation,
Yep.
with any issues or recommendations being forwarded to the Alice Springs Divisional Superintendent and the Superintendent Territory Support and Specialist Services. Now, I stand to be corrected, I don't think the term debrief is defined otherwise in the document.
Oh, I don't know.
But are you familiar with the debrief as it's used in the Northern Territory Police Service?
Are you asking me am I familiar with the definition of how we use it?
Well, are you familiar with the term debrief and what does it mean to you?
Well, so you'd have a debrief from, like, for example, if we have a pursuit, we have to have a debrief with the supervisor. So that's quite a formal debrief. So you'll come in and you'll work out what happened and what didn't happen, what should have happened, what shouldn't have happened.
Sorry, you said when you have a what?
A formal debrief. So after a pursuit.
After a pursuit,
Yeah,
so that's a pursuit in a motor vehicle pursuing a...
Yeah, so on when we record a pursuit, we have to record if a debrief was done and who was done by. It's part of the interface. But we also use a debrief for having beers.
Well, so can I then draw a distinction between 2 types of debrief? Is there an operational debrief?
Yes,
And then-
yes.
And then what you call a welfare check
Yeah.
type debrief. And so an operational debrief takes a particular form.
Yes.
And let's take the pursuit one, for example, that there will be a series of things that need to be ticked off.
Correct.
To ensure that, when I say ticked off, I mean checked,
Yeah.
to ensure that certain things have been followed.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't expect there to be alcohol consumed at that debrief.
No.
That's more of a formal process.
Yeah.
So in terms of the welfare check, and is that commonly used, is the term debrief commonly used also in respect of a welfare check?
I think if you use the word, if I messaged someone and said, let's catch up for a welfare check, them being males, they'd probably say no.
When you sent the text, there'll be a debrief at a particular time, and I think in the text, did you say, I'll bring the beers?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yes, it did.
Is that code for, this is not a formal debrief, this is just a...
We're having beers, yeah.
We're having beers, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Now, had you ever been deployed as part of the IRT?
I have.
On how many occasions prior to 9 November 2019?
Maybe 5?
And on how many occasions did you do a debrief that was completed and documented?
Or did I take part in one, or did I actually do the document?
Did you take part in one?
Well, you do have Sergeant Bones will get us back and we would talk about it, but I can't remember if he documented it or not.
Well, look at paragraph 1.2.2.
Yeah.
That is an operational debrief, isn't it?
Yes, that's what it says, yeah.
That's not talking about getting together for a few beers.
No.
And so you think that in your past 5 IRT deployments that a debrief was conducted by, is it Sergeant Bowens?
Sergeant Bowens, yeah.
Will be able to tell us about that?
Possibly.
Did you have beers when you had those debriefs with Sergeant Bones?
No, a lot of times when we come back from an IRT job, because you'd be sorting out your kit in the IRT room, and Sergeant Bones would kind of cover off and kind of identify, not issues, but how it went. But then again, a debrief could be done, if you're out remote, the debrief could have been done at the end of it. Like a lot of times, he talked to us like we're waiting on the tarmac for Air Wing to arrive. So it's a pretty relaxed type of form, if you know what I mean.
And that's quite different from the pursuits debrief that you do.
The pursuit debrief is part of our general orders, and it's actually, there's a requirement within the promise system that you fill it in. So that's normally done by the watch commander when you come back in from the pursuit, because you can't close off a pursuit job on a police system until you turn around and click debrief and who it's done by.
Right.
So that's like an aid memoir to make sure you do it.
So obviously that doesn't apply in respect of, well, it didn't apply in respect of your 5 IRT deployments.
It wasn't a requirement, like it wasn't created in the module on the system, on the computer system. So it's not like you had to go and tick it.
Have you ever had, in your role with the posse, do you have debriefs at any particular point if there's a traumatic event?
Traumatic event? I'll do it. I did a debrief at the end of every shift, which used to really annoy them.
Annoy you or annoy you?
Well, the fact is, I used to tell them they used to come back in at 9 o'clock, but I'd say, well, you're rostered till 9:30. So we do a debrief, and then I make them sort out their kit.
And then when you did the debrief, did you record that?
No.
And what was involved in that debrief?
It was more about, me asking them questions. How did everything go today? Did we have any issues? Like, obviously, we'd bring up names of people who were becoming problems, or people doing multiple purchasing. It was kind of like, and it was also to make sure that everyone came back, because, they're all working all around Alice Springs, and, it's quite easy to forget if one's come back. So I used to have it up in the whiteboard, so when they came back, they had to wipe their name off.
Was there any alcohol at those debriefs?
It was in the police station, so no. I did. No, that wasn't it. Okay, sorry, go on.
Well,
Your question.
I'm now interested in the answer to that.
I'm preempting your question.
Well, when you organised the debrief with the IRT for the day following, or those days that followed 9 November, that was going to be in the IRT room, was it?
Yeah.
Is that the police station?
No, it's across the road. It's in where the watch house is. It'd be part of the property, but...
Are you allowed alcohol in that room?
We have had beers in there before.
Now, have you ever had a traumatic event where you've had a psychologist present at a debrief?
No. actually, no. I don't think so.
Now, I understand that you saw Constable Rolfe on the 10th of November 2019 at the hospital.
Yep.
Can you recollect who was present at that meeting?
Yes, Jimmy Nolan, who is one of the forensics guys, he's now up in Darwin, and Justin...
Forensics, did you
Forensics,
say?
yeah, sorry, ma'am.
That's okay.
And then Justin Thomas, who's a detective, and there was someone else, I think.
And were you directed to be there?
No,
And why were you there?
to make sure he was okay.
You then, and you understand he was receiving medical treatment at the hospital?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Do you know if he was receiving any psychological or psychiatric support at that time?
Not at that time.
Then you saw him again before this barbecue event, is that right?
Yep,
And where was that at?
at his house. I know where you're going with this.
I'm not quite sure myself, so can you tell me? So you saw him, then, sorry, say that again. You saw him then at his house.
His house.
And who else was present for that meeting?
Rachel Wilkinson.
And what's her role?
She's a constable. I was the posse sergeant again the next morning, and Rachel was working as well, so we both went round to Zach's house.
And then this third occasion where you sent the text in respect of the debrief and the beers, the welfare check was at his house again.
Well, I didn't organise it at his house. The first time I went to Zach's house was the day before Rachel. I think Rachel knew where I lived, I didn't.
So how did it come to be organised at his house?
For this, well, I'd have to go through the text, I suppose.
So you organised for the beers at the IRT,
Yeah.
and then somehow that was transformed or morphed into being beers and a barbecue at Zach's house.
Yeah. Sorry, can I just say it actually wasn't a barbecue?
All right, that's right. Yeah.
Sorry, we didn't cook anything.
So I understand your concerns, and I commend you on your concerns for your fellow officer. But can I say this? There's obviously balancing here a situation between compromising the evidentiary circumstances. You understand that?
Yes.
And giving a welfare check.
Yes.
Did you ever think that it would be better that you try to engage with some medical or other assistance either within the police service or otherwise to monitor that situation rather than turning to alcohol?
Well, I wouldn't say it was actually turned to alcohol, but as I said before, I think I seen it as too serious a matter to kind of leave it up to someone else. I knew that if I went around, I could make sure for my peace of mind how he was doing. So, yeah, I don't think in Alice Springs we actually didn't have a police psychologist. I don't know if we do now.
Thank you, Ron, and nothing further.
I think they fly down and visit.
Sorry?
I think they fly down and visit from Darwin, the psychologist. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Mr. Derrick.
Good afternoon. My name is Mr. Derrick.
Hello.
I'm from Nature. I just want to ask a couple of questions about the nature of the IRT. At page 68 of your first recorded interview, you said that the initial response of IRT was in cordon and contain capacity.
Yeah.
So, for example, and this is quote continuing. So, for example, I'll say hostage situation. Persons inside, you'd have a hostage inside, we'd cordon and contain it with the view that PRG would come down.
Yep.
Now, additionally, you also note at page 69 of your first recorded interview, you say that it evolved into IRT from cordon and containment.
Yeah.
Can I take it that the operational role of the IRT expanded beyond just cordon and contain?
I couldn't answer that. I wasn't involved in that.
You weren't involved in that?
No.
Okay. One other set of details then is that at page 70 of your first recorded interview, you were asked about the capabilities of IRT, and you mentioned cordon and contain.
Yep.
Then you mentioned force entries and an immediate action response. Is that something that you're aware of that became added to the IRT as things progressed?
I can't remember, sorry.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
Was
Now,
it IRT when you joined, or did it change?
I think when I joined, it was maybe RRT or in the process of changing. I don't know. I think it was. I was told it was someone really high up that changed the name. So
now at page 44 of your second recorded interview, you were asked about how a police officer's military background might impacting on getting into the IRT.
yeah,
And your answer was that it doesn't, and this is to quote, sorry, it doesn't, that's not a requirement. And then you go on to note that you're looking for people who are fit, motivated, who are easygoing.
yes.
Now, appreciating that it's not a requirement to be ex-military to be an IRT, would it otherwise be fair to say that due to the tactical nature of the IRT, having an infantry or military background would still be something that would still be valued when considering the application of the recruit?
I don't, because I was never part of the recruitment process for RRT. I think, well, it's you could have people who'd have a military background, but then are not good to work with. So I think it was more the fact that you had people who were good team players, compassionate. Sergeant Bones was quite particular that we used to be quite humble when we were in the station. Not that we wouldn't be. So I don't. It's not like being in the army was a criteria would get you in, if you know what I mean.
Okay. But would you accept that if a person was otherwise cooperative and humble,
Yes.
that having that background in the military would assist in recruitment?
I don't insist. I don't think it'd be an added bonus over someone else. I don't think that's how it'd be viewed, because we had other people in the station who had a military background that went in IRT, and I think had applied as well. So,
Okay. At page 19 of your first recorded interview, you were talking about the information you received that the nurses from Yundamu had withdrawn on the day of the 9th.
yeah.
And you made a comment to say that you were not interested in the information that the nurses from Yundamu had withdrawn. Now, in your second recorded interview, page 66, you were asked to clarify what you meant by that. And your response was, well, and I think probably what I was trying to say is it doesn't change how we police. And then you go on to say, and it's not a requirement for us to only attend communities with nurses. I think that's probably what I was implying there.
Yeah.
Now, I appreciate that police have to perform their duties, whether or not nurses are in a community.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But shouldn't the lack of nurses be something that should ensure that particular care is given to the methods used in performing those duties?
I don't know. Sorry, Your Honour, I wasn't aware that Julie Frost used to be a nurse before I answered this, so it wasn't that I was trying to say that Julie... I didn't know, sorry, when I answered this. I can't say I really thought about it like that.
Okay, so it wasn't something in your consideration.
No, I don't think so.
All right. Even though in this particular instance, for the fact that this called Kumanjayi Walker had been involved in that axe incident, and that there was a greater chance that force might be used, that wasn't something in your contemplation.
Well, I think by having more police arrive in the community, you can tend to minimise the force. I'm not going to comment on Julie's plan, but I think there was already 4 people and 4 officers in Yundamu, maybe 5, and having 4 more, 9. 9's pretty good for a community. And I think that alone could minimise the risk of force being used.
Okay. But just to be clear, that wasn't something that in your contemplation at the time.
I don't know, sorry.
Okay. I will talk very briefly on the general order that requires immediate segregation of officers for a death in custody. Now, you may not be aware of this, and my question doesn't require you to have knowledge of this, but in 2015, there was an inquest into the death of a man, I won't say his first name out of respect for the family, but it was the death and inquest of a Mr. Wuramaba. And for everybody's benefit, that's 2015 NTMC 013. Now, in that case, the former coroner was considering a death after a police pursuit and noted that a failure to ensure immediate segregation of witnesses, particularly any police members directly involved in the matter. So he saw that there was an issue with segregation immediately after the death. He went on to say, I do not criticise the officers involved in this regard. However, I do remind the Commissioner of Police and all NT police members of the importance of the terms of this general order and the importance of the compliance wherever possible. It may be a timely reminder to be sent to members about those provisions and their importance. Okay. Now, that decision was handed down on the 26th of May 2015. And as I understand it from your evidence, you were an NT police officer at that stage?
I was, yes. Yep.
Do you recall any steps taken by management around that time to reiterate that particular point from that general order?
No, sorry, I don't recall.
In any case, what practical steps do you think would assist members of your rank and or lower to be aware of these kinds of, or that particular requirement?
What practical? I suppose just that the message reinforced. I think, I'll definitely make sure it doesn't happen again. I think most people who've appeared will as well. So, I don't know if something like that is conveyed to people who've done the sergeant's course. I've never done the sergeant's course. So it's a possibility that from a management role that's reinforced.
So my final area of questioning, from around page 26 of your second recorded interview, you're asked a series of questions about whether or not you had a critique about how the officers involved in the attempted arrest on the 6th of November, how they responded. Now, you ultimately responded with, personally, from my previous jurisdictions, we would shovel through anything to find them. And then you go on to say, and personally, if I was out there, if it was one of my members, then they would be hunted. So that's what's in the interview.
Yeah, I remember reading that, yeah.
Did you ever express that opinion to other members of the IRT on or before the 9th of November 2019?
No.
Okay. Can we take it that if you were involved, what you're saying is that if you were involved, that you would have immediately tried to attempt to arrest Kumanjayi Walker?
If I was involved in...
If you were in Yundamil on the 6th of November...
Oh, yep.
Can we take the meaning of what you said to mean that you would have immediately attempted to arrest Kumanjayi Walker?
Is this when the guys opened the bedroom door?
Yes.
But
So,
they also attempted to arrest him, so...
okay, well, I'll put it a different way. Would you continue to attempt to arrest him immediately after he ran away?
Well, I suppose, I knew I was going to be picked up for using that word, so that's fine. I did say it. I think it's more the fact that what happened was extremely serious. I make no apologies for doing my job, but what happened there, I definitely would have more motivation to go and catch them.
Okay. And so when you're saying you'd shovel through anything,
Yes, figure of speech.
would you accept it? It appears that you're saying that you'd stop at nothing to apprehend him?
Well, no, really, it's just a figure of speech, I suppose.
Okay. And I put it to you, it sounds at least, that what you're saying is you would attempt to arrest him even if you continue to attempt to arrest him even if you found out more information about the local police about his circumstances.
No, that doesn't suggest that.
Oh. Now, I note you've specifically used the word hunted.
Yeah.
Okay. And you haven't used words like arrest or apprehended.
Yeah.
Okay. And the majority, would it be fair to say that the majority of the people you would arrest in the IRT capacity are Aboriginal people?
Yes.
Okay. And you'd accept using the word hunted in this context connotes that the subject is somewhat dehumanised?
No.
Okay.
I think you have to remember when I made that second statement, it was after Zach had been arrested, so I can't say I was in a happy place at that stage.
I appreciate that, but the flip side of that also, wouldn't you agree, is that you made that statement on the 29th of January 2020 after you knew that Kumanjayi Walker had passed away.
Yeah. Yeah, I apologize. If I do it again, I wouldn't use that word.
Okay. And would you otherwise accept or otherwise agree that the use of the phrase hunted might otherwise convey that a level of force would be used in the apprehension that might have necessarily been violent?
No.
Okay, that's all my questions.
Thank you.
Your Honour, we have no questions for this
Thanks, Mr O'Brien. Any other questions?
None from me, Your Honour. None from me, Your Honour. None from me, Your Honour.
Mr
Yes,
Edwardson?
I do, thank you. Cindy, you've answered many questions about your role on the day as a posse sergeant. You referred to how busy you were. Just summarise again what you were doing on the morning of the 9th that kept you so busy.
Well, as I said, we've got. So I can cover off the reason I had the beers that I so to try and so it's a 12-hour shift for the Pally members, and they're only rostered for I think 9 hours. So previous in the week I organised with Commander Curry if we could have beers at the station because of someone's birthday coming up. So that's why I had the beers. I bought 2 boxes of beers, and that was a more kind of like enticed them to stay till 9:30 because we were so short-staffed. If they choose to finish at 7:30, there was nobody covering them. So then the bottle shops would have been open, and when the bottle shops are open, you do realise it's more busier for general duties. So if we kind of man the bottle shops better, it works better. We also had only 14 members, so the 12 bottle shops, 14 members. And because we'd one support cage, it means we had nobody to cover. Normally, if you had extra support cages and people left, you could just put them in that position till bottle shops closed. So it was Saturday. Saturday is crazy when you have enough people, but I didn't have enough people.
So that meant juggling and allocating on the run so that members were too up to discharge their duties. So
Yeah, you get no break that day.
Right. So that addressing that issue was your principal responsibility on the day?
Yeah, that's where the phone call keeps ringing, and phone keeps ringing there, the radio keeps, and you're just getting called all the time.
There were other things happening in and around Alice Springs on that day.
I think we had a bus crash, we had the bus crash, so I think a lot of resources went out there.
Did you have any role in relation to allocating resources to respond to that, or did it impact upon the members?
Yeah, it definitely did impact, and I'm pretty sure it impacted after the shooting as well, for what staff were available.
All right. So how did those other responsibilities affect the extent of conversations which you were having with people in relation to the allocation of members from the IRT to go out to UNJ?
Put it this way, the conversations were probably a lot shorter than what I would have liked because I was just so busy.
Yes. So when you've described being in, I think, Mr. Nobbs's office and speaking at that time with Mr. Furness, is that right?
Yeah.
How long did those conversations take?
Oh, minutes.
Yes. And I think you've said to Her Honour that you didn't write formal notes of those conversations.
No.
And was there a reason for you not doing so?
No, there wasn't. Well, apart from really busy, but I think it was just the fact that he asked for 4 members, and I thought, well, I can sort that out.
Yes. let's go then to the role that you were fulfilling in relation to what you've described as logistics.
Yeah.
Because you've been asked by our learned friend Mr. Bowe in particular about the extent of your responsibilities in terms of briefing those men and similar. So what was the first aspect of your logistical responsibility in terms of locating men who could go to UNDP?
To go through phone list
Yeah.
and ring out to see call to see who was available.
Right.
As I said, the first few weren't. And then when I managed to get full, I just kind of wait till they come in. I think I tried to sort out vehicles in the meantime.
Right, so you had to have the necessary vehicles
Yeah.
for the men to be able to transport themselves to UNDP.
Yeah, I was able to get one vehicle, which we were kind of using it as a semi-drone vehicle. And then we had to have a police cage vehicle because the view was they were going to bring someone back.
To bring him back.
Yeah.
Right. So those logistical matters were attended to by you.
Yeah, I don't know if I didn't fuel up the vehicles. I was just too busy to fuel them up. But yeah, I sorted them out.
But those again were administrative matters that did need to be attended to by somebody.
Yeah,
If
definitely.
not by you, then someone on your behalf.
Yeah, well, there was no one else in the station to ask.
All right. So you located 4 people who were available and who were prepared to undertake the task of
Yeah.
going to UNDP to supplement resources and apprehend Kumanjayi.
Yeah.
And you spoke briefly to each of the men to orient them as to what, in the broadest sense, would be the task that they were expected to perform.
Yeah.
Right. And then each of them came into the station, amongst other things, to gather what they needed to go. Is
Yep.
that right?
Yep.
And you spoke to them at that stage briefly?
I spoke to them briefly when they all came in. That's when I just told them
Yes.
what they had to do and where they were going.
Right. Now, you've just described it as speaking briefly to them.
Yep.
For how long did you speak to them in order to communicate that information to them before they left?
Less than a couple of minutes.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, why is it that briefing, we're using that word, was so short?
Well, I've done the road to UNDP, Your Honour, and when they came in, I think it was 2:30 or 3:00. Yeah, it's 300 k's out there. If you drive out there at dusk on night time, it's full of horses. It's not a road you want to do when it's dark. Right. And I was you guys, because I knew they'd have to go get food. Because when they get out there, it's possible the shop would have been closed. It being a Saturday.
Yes.
And it's really just to hurry them up so they can kind of get there before it gets dark.
But is it difficult to see the horses as dusk is coming on?
You can't see them if they don't look at you. You can't see them.
Right.
Because then you don't see the reflection in their eyes, and you are honestly down to doing 60, 70 kilometers an hour, and then it's going to take you all night to get there.
And from your point of view, it was important to get them out there, 1, safely,
Yeah.
and 2, reasonably quickly so that they could perform their duties
Yeah.
and be briefed by the sergeant at the station.
Yeah.
And before going, they needed to get themselves organised with any food that needed to be taken.
Yeah.
And also they needed to get any accoutrements or weapons that they needed to take.
Yeah, and also the logistics of where the RRT room is and the muster room is, you're constantly going to cross the road. So it's, so it is a pain sometimes getting the kit.
And let's just talk about the kit requirements. In your head, from what you've told Her Honour, you were hoping at least, perhaps expecting, that they were only going to be at UNDP for a short time.
Yeah.
But that was no sure thing in terms of the fact that you couldn't say for sure how long it was going to take them to apprehend Kumanjayi.
No.
Correct?
Yeah.
They could come upon him straight away,
Yep.
as far as you were concerned,
Yeah.
or it might take really quite some considerable time, requiring them to stay out there until they had found him and could bring him back.
Or they could go there and he might not even be in community.
Yeah. And you knew from the start of it that there was a funeral there,
Yeah.
with people coming in from Nirrupi and other locations.
Yeah.
And that could mean that there were some extra difficulties that were encountered in terms of supplementing the resources in UNDP.
Yeah.
All right. So do those matters bear upon the instructions that you gave to them in terms of what they should take to Uwindamu? In terms of accoutrements, weapons, etc.?
Yeah, I think as well as that, because they were wearing blue uniforms as well, I think that probably changed of what they took out as well.
Could you explain that to Her Honour, please?
Because our IRT kit, Your Honour, covers everything. Like you'd be wearing your camos. Everyone would take an AR-15. Everyone would take a helmet. Everyone would take body armour. You obviously have other equipment you'd take, the forced entry equipment. But because it was a general duties style deployment, the decision was left up to them what they wanted to take.
Right. Did you give them any guidance as to what they should take so that they could manage any eventualities which presented?
I think one of them asked me if he would take the AR-15.
And what was your response?
I said I would.
Right. And why did you say you would?
Well, it's more the fact that, that's 300 k's away.
Yes.
And, if we did get another RRT call out there, at least they'd have some of their equipment.
Yes.
But also, it's kind of, you're better off, we have a saying back home, you'd rather look at it than look forward. So, at least they'd have it out there if they needed it.
So is this the situation? It's better to be prepared for all eventualities, given the unpredictability of the tasks which they could be called upon to perform.
And they're 300 k's away as well.
300 k's away, and also things can be unexpectedly volatile in communities.
Yeah, it can flip on a coin.
So it's better that they be ready for eventualities rather than that they not have the resources that they might need.
Yep.
And is there a distinction between having equipment available and actually utilising equipment?
Of course.
And is part of that, for instance, that they might have AR-15s with them, but they may well not decide to take them out into community. But
Sure.
At least they're there.
Yeah.
All right. You were clear in your head that this was a general duties deployment?
Yeah.
Now, I want to ask you about this issue of high risk. I wonder if a witness, if it could be put up on the screen, please. Exhibit 5, which was tendered on the 8th of September, and that is a... No, it was excuse me just a moment, John. I'm after. I'll go to that one first. I wonder if you could first be shown, beg your pardon, your first statement, which is at 7-95 of the inquest brief. When that becomes available, I wonder if we could go to page 92 of it, please. This is going to be put up on the screen in front
thanks.
of you.
Yeah.
See that? Okay. No, thank you. So it might be easiest if it's just shown to the witness in hard form. Thank you. All right.
Sure. I think we've found it though.
Oh, good. All right.
We'll keep going this way, but we'll have both.
Perfect. All right. Senior, what I'm asking you to look at, but it might be helpful for my colleagues if that can be put up on the screen.
Yes, we are.
Thank you. Excellent. You're going to have two versions of it now, but they'll be the same, I hope.
Yeah.
Thank you. Down at the bottom of that page, if you would, please. That's it. Yeah, starting there. Thank you. Now, I'm asking you about this issue that was raised with you by counsel assisting about the level of risk, all right, and what you've said in your interview. And I'm wanting to let you see what you said in context. So you can see there that you were asked about whether the level of risk was discussed during the briefing, and you said no. I'll stop there, and I'm going to ask you some more questions about that. Why did you not discuss level of risk at that 2-minute briefing that you told Your Honour about a minute ago?
I probably because I wasn't really aware of the full duties when they went out. I know Sergeant Frost had definitely more information.
Yeah.
So for me to give them a level of risk, it really would have probably put them off.
Okay. So I'm going to come back to this, but what was your responsibility in terms of explaining the situation and the purpose of the mission as against Sergeant Frost's?
Sergeant Frost she was the OIC station, she would have had more information than me. And also as well that 3 hours is a long time and things can change. So.
All right. Now you can see that you were asked here about the level of risk in your mind for the 4 members, and you're asked about that by Mr. Carter, and you say level of risk we probably deal with it every day. We'll just scroll down if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Stop there. Thank you. And Carter says, okay, and you say, so type we deal with like any GDs or any officer deal with someone who's violent. Yep. And it's no different than attending any other job where the person's got alert. So I suppose with this one he had probably a couple of days before he's taken an axe to 2 members, but it's no different than what we do. We're policing. What were you communicating there?
That basically any job has the what's the word I'm looking for? And basically any job that we go to can become really violent really quickly.
Can become violent, all right?
Yeah.
So that's part of the dynamic evolution.
Yeah, dynamic, yeah. It wasn't the word I was thinking of, but yeah.
But the kind of the static factor was that something had happened on the 6th, about which you've been asked many questions.
Yeah.
How unusual is it for a weapon to be presented and then for there to be a subsequent need to arrest the individual?
No, it's not unusual. It's
Not unusual?
No. People.
You look at me almost as though
Yeah.
I asked you a bizarre question.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
But
Sorry.
it's important to actually go into this.
Yeah.
People need to be arrested all the time in communities and
Yeah.
in Alice and elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
And there can be some level of violence or in the background or in the presentation of a person who needs to be arrested.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yep.
Is that exceptional?
That people have weapons, no?
Right. And general duties members or those who are assisting them have to deal with that situation routinely. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd probably say general duties is probably the most dangerous job.
Why do you say that?
Because general duties, you don't know what you're going to.
Mm.
And that's what it is. It's like, I mean, like taking the axe instance, like they were doing a door knock and guy opened the door and that went pretty crazy pretty quick.
Yes.
But yeah, I've went to jobs where, and I've said noise complaint before, where it's just been noise complaint and you are calling for backup because it's just got so volatile so quick.
And you'd seen the body-worn camera footage of this incident, and unpredictably, Kumanjayi produced an axe, brandished it, and then ran off and evaded apprehension. Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that kind of scenario something extraordinary or remarkable, unparalleled in your experience?
I wouldn't say it's extraordinary. I think it's just a timely reminder that these things happen to us.
Yeah. But it had happened 3 days before.
Yeah.
And it needed to be factored into the police response, I suppose.
Yeah.
When these 4 members were being sent out to Uendamu to take him into custody.
Yes.
It needed to be in their minds that there could be a repetition or in some way some response similar to that by Kumanjayi when these men attempted to take him into custody, correct?
Of course, yeah.
All right. So did that alone make him a high-risk offender or make it into a high-risk situation in your head?
I think what he did at that time became high risk.
On the 6th, in the context,
yes.
Right there and then, it elevated into being high risk.
It did.
Okay. Let's put that to one side. Here are 4 men being sent out to do various things in Uendamu, and amongst those was to take him into custody.
Yep.
does the fact that he had responded on the 6th render the scenario on the 9th necessarily high risk?
Not necessarily.
Okay. But it could become so.
It could be.
On what he did this time.
Yeah, it could be.
Okay. Could you put it back up, please? Let's go down. It needs to go back up. All right. So let's just go through what you said to Mr. Carter. You said it's a type like any GDs or any officer deal with someone who's vulnerable. Yep. It's no different from attending any other job where the person's got alerts. You explained that. Okay. So was it low, medium, high risk in your mind? And you said probably like most of the jobs we go to are probably high risk. Yeah. Okay. But you said to her on something a little bit different here, and you've been asked by our learned friend about that. So how do you reconcile these issues of whether it was high risk or not high risk? What would you like to say to her about it?
Whether it was high risk or not high risk, it's kind of a hard one, I think, because part of any job can be low risk and then high risk then become low risk. So...
Can it be put this way? There was some elevated risk about taking this man into custody based upon how he'd behaved 3 days before.
Oh yeah, you'd go with what person's actions, yeah.
But he wasn't an armed offender, an active armed offender.
No.
He wasn't known to have a rifle or anything else.
No.
He didn't have a known history of antagonism toward the police.
No, I don't think so.
He behaved in a threatening, problematic way 3 days before.
Yeah.
And so he needed to be taken into custody, and people needed to be alert to that elevated level of risk.
Sure.
But classifying him technically as a high-risk person, potentially, for instance, requiring the TRG, would have been an overreaction.
Yeah, I don't think we could have justified.
All right, thank you. Now, sir, you've been asked questions broadly about your role in first briefing the members to go out there, but also your interactions with Sergeant Frost, the officer in charge at New Indomoo. Now what I'd like shown, if I could please, is Exhibit 5, which is Attachment 1 to 795. And that is, Your Honour, the 1624 email from Sergeant McCormack.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. To Sergeant Frost.
I think that's now exhibit 12. I'm not sure.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
That looks like it, yes, Your Honour. It does now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. If it can be brought up easily, so much the better, but it's not essential. Now, do you recognise this 1624 email?
I do, yes.
Was this a communication that you sent to Sergeant Frost at 1624 on that afternoon of the 9th?
It was.
Now, why did you send that to her?
It was really just letting her know what she was getting, because it was because she had to do an ops order, so she needed the information.
Right. Now, was this in any sense a draft of an ops order that she was going to need to generate herself?
Well, you could call it a draft. It's like she'd have needed this information for her ops order. So.
Well, let's scrutinise that a bit. She needed information.
Yep.
Well, first of all, to know who was turning up at her station, right?
Yep.
And what they had.
Correct.
And then she was going to have to generate a separate exercise herself.
Yep.
To do what you just described as an ops order.
Of course.
Or, if put another way, an arrest plan.
Yep.
Okay. Now, you don't, in that document that you send at 1624, go into any detail about how the arrest should be carried out, do you?
No, I didn't. No, I had no involvement in how it was going to be done.
Okay, let's just look at that, please. You had no involvement in how that was going to be done because your role and I'm not meaning to downgrade it in any way, was essentially logistics as you've described it. Is that right?
Yeah, 4 people. Obviously, they're going to need vehicles, so it's really just sorting out equipment. I suppose we could treat the people as equipment.
Well, let's not do that, but 4 people.
4 people,
2 vehicles.
2 vehicles, and obviously...
And the weaponry and other things that
Yeah.
they would need to stay out
Yeah.
there for as long as they need to stay
Of
out
course.
there.
And people needed a record of what was actually going out there.
And it was also important for these men's senior officers to know what they were doing and to explain why they weren't going to be in Alice Springs and available potentially for their other duties.
Yeah, if you see, Your Honour, I CC'd the guy's supervisors in. So it's just like, it's just so when they come in, they can go, well, where's such and such? And they can see an email that actually they're going out to Yuendamu. And also for the vehicles as well. People go looking for cars and they're not there, but no one knows who took them. Yeah.
Right. And they might not be back for a little while
Yeah.
until these men had finished what they needed to do.
Yeah.
So you copied in all the relevant personnel who were otherwise the immediate superiors of the men so that they knew exactly how
Correct.
things worked. And as of your having located the men, sent them away with what they needed, and sent that email to Sergeant Frost, copying in the men's superiors, were your responsibilities in respect of this operation pretty much discharged?
Yeah, I didn't really do anything else with this.
All right. And at that point, is it fair to say that the responsibility for undertaking the plan, utilising the information that you'd sent, that of Sergeant Frost, the officer in charge at Yuendamu?
I believe so.
And was it your expectation that she would generate that ops order or arrest plan and then would undertake an oral briefing of the men as necessary?
Yes.
Because again, she knew her circumstances at Yuendamu.
Yep.
Things might have changed in the 3 hours while they were on their way to Yuendamu.
Yep.
And she was the person best positioned to plan, utilising local resources, including those present at the station and available to her, to organise how best she could draw upon the skills of the 4 IRT men.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And what about the dog squad member? When did you learn about his involvement in the exercise?
I think that might have been told by Julie. Might have told me that, or I can't remember. I didn't know the dog handler was sent out or going out.
But
until after.
Until after it had all happened.
Yeah, until after the 4 guys left to Yuendamu.
I see.
So I never told them Donaldson was going to be there.
But between the time of the 4 leaving and the 4 arriving, you learnt that their resource would be supplemented by a dog squad member.
Yeah.
All right. So there was, to your knowledge then, at some point shortly after the 4 left, 5 men and a dog with appropriate resourcing to undertake the tasks that Julie was going to assign specifically to those extra resources.
I believe so, yeah.
And I note that you sent this to Jodie Nobbs, who you've spoken to, and Sean Finnis, who you've spoken to, and neither of them responded in any way to the information that you had placed in this email.
I don't believe so, Your Honour.
And there must have been some other records, like personnel records for payment and things like that people had been sent out. But is this the only kind of written account of the details of the incident that you made?
It is, yes.
Now, these 5 men and the dog were being sent to a remote community about 3 hours away. you've said to Her Honour that you had some understanding and particular experience, in fact, of remote communities yourself.
Yes, I was remote sergeant in Ramaginning for 2.5 years. Ramaginning is up in Arnhem Land, and we also look after Milngimby Island as well.
Right. So a different kind of remote community, but one which had its own challenges.
Oh, of course, yes, definitely. Yeah.
And did you find you developed skills and awareness of
Loved it.
the needs of remote communities by your
Yeah.
time at Ramaginning?
Loved it. Myself and there was another officer, Adam Goldsmith. Our young was pretty decent. So when we'd have the locals come into the front counter, we'd get them to speak in language first so we could try and figure out what they were saying. So
Yes.
the majority of times we didn't, because obviously they speak really fast, the pronunciation's different. But yeah, I was out there, my wife and kids. My young daughter went to the school as well. We got really involved in the community.
And so you did what you could to acquire some language. Why was that? Why did you make that effort?
Oh, because you lived there. Why not? They found it. I found it easier, and they obviously used to laugh at how I'd say stuff. But even when I was going around to arrest someone, I used to say it in language and their name, and they'd laugh and they go, "Oh, he's over at the shop, or we'll go get him for you."
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's like you live there. Why not try and learn language?
What do you think it communicated to people in the local community that you were trying to speak in their language?
I think it probably showed that I put the effort in. I was also invited to go out and assist with setting up a men's business, but I had to be away for a few days, so I couldn't have done that. Yeah, I think it just shows that you're trying to you make an effort. You gain more from it than what you lose by not doing it. So, and also when we left the community gave us this beautiful painting. So, yeah, it's good.
And what did they do about the prospect of you leaving the community
So
and coming back?
we had one of the ladies said she was going to write a letter down to the Arundel people to say I wasn't welcome, so then I'd have to stay in Ramagini. So it was good. And like, you mean, we still policed them. Like, it's not like, no one got a free pass.
Yes.
I think like Adam was from New Zealand, so I think the policing was just kind of different. Like, there was a few teething problems, like when we'd arrest someone, everyone would come to the station and they'd be go, "Oh, you're arrested." But as long as you let two of the elders come in and go, "It's fine," they're like, actually, and then that just stopped. They just trusted us. So, yeah.
I want to just ask you a couple of questions. I'm just finishing about the support that you endeavoured to facilitate for Mr. Rolfe and others who had been involved in this tragic incident. You've told Her Honour that by reason of your family circumstances you were particularly alert to the fact that people can have special needs after being in a traumatic experience. Is that right?
Yeah.
I don't even think they're special needs. I just think they're ordinary needs.
Ordinary needs after an exceptional experience, I suppose, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, quite. So you, from the sound of it, you played a real role in just trying to check in and
Yep.
make sure that the members involved, but especially Mr. Rolfe, who was living on his own,
Yeah.
had some support. First of all, from the sound of it, your plan was that be at the IRT offices.
Yeah.
And did you actually try to organise that some beers could be available for people there?
Yeah, well, I already had the beers that I bought earlier, and
But you can't normally have beers at the station, can you?
no, you can't. No,
So did you have to ask permission for
you
that?
did have to ask permission. Yeah,
You did that?
yeah,
And was it after that it evolved into
Yeah.
being at Mr. Rolfe's house?
yeah. I'd have never suggested we go to Zach's house. Yeah.
Yes. And if that was going to take place, in fact, is it more appropriate that it be at somebody's house rather than at the station?
Yeah, yeah.
And then it wasn't a barbecue, but some pizzas were available for people to eat while they were there. Is that it?
No one gave me any money for the pizzas.
That's something you can
Yes.
sort out outside.
No, I think it's too late now.
Too late now. But more seriously, this was a gathering that you have reflected about with the passage of time,
Yeah,
is it not?
yeah, it is.
Now, it was not long since Kumanjayi had passed away, when people were getting together for this purpose.
Yeah.
Did you have any intention to be insensitive or disrespectful of the deceased man or his family by people getting together in these circumstances?
None, and I can probably elaborate on that a bit more. When after this incident happened, I spoke to my mum back home, so she went and lit a candle for Kumanjayi's family. She did novena, so she's a Catholic. She did novena, which is where they go to church twice a day for 7 days, or it could be 9 days. And every year she's lit a candle for him, and she will light one next month. So it's not as if we didn't like that. You know, I know people see us as just a blue uniform, but we're people, and I don't think anyone really wished this happened. But yeah, so my mum does that.
And if any members of the community formed the view that this gathering on a Monday amongst police officers was insensitive toward Kumanjayi's family, what would you say to them?
Well, it's kind of hard. I think it's kind of set people then in different paths in a way.
Yes.
I think, like you mean, at the end of the day, he was someone's child.
Yes.
And so that isn't lost on any of us police officers. It's just not. But I think I'd like in getting back to being around that tax place, it was purely a welfare thing.
And a number of you then did gather on that evening
Yeah.
at Sachs Place. There's evidence that's been given to Her Honour from Mr. Ebel that at some point during the evening you intervened and told people not to talk about what had happened
Yeah.
a couple of days before. Do you accept that that's something you did?
Yeah, and it wouldn't just be not talk about that. It'd be just don't talk about work. We're not at work.
Well, that's so, but do you recognise that it was particularly important in those circumstances not to talk about what had happened a couple of days ago?
I do.
Because there was an investigation continuing.
Yeah.
And thinking about that and now being more reflective about that uncomfortable situation, do you recognise that it was perhaps not the best idea to have a gathering of people while the investigation was taking place so shortly afterwards?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Thank you.
How should peer support, not necessarily peer support, how should support be provided in those circumstances?
Well, that's kind of a hard one. I think it's kind of like you want someone who Zach not so much confide in but trusts, but then it's kind of hard because like when I spoke to him and like you mean and the comfort you try and give, it's like I'm also not qualified. So, and I get it. It's like, you mean, for us to go see someone who's qualified, we don't know them. So it's kind of a hard one. I think, like our organisation has got a lot better just recently.
Okay, so what is being done better now?
Now we have mental health workshops. I believe the peer support is being expanded. There is, and the mental health workshops, like probably every couple of days on our intranet, we now have something about mental health. And we had this flyer come out about trying to teach you to go home from work, to switch off, hug your kids, put your uniform away. You're at home now, try and focus on something else. Because I know personally, when you're police here for 6 years, and it can be you're exposed to quite a lot of violent incidents working in Alice Springs. I used to have times when I go home and it'd be say 1 or 2 in the morning, the house is quiet, but my head is just still ringing. So, yeah, it's not easy sometimes.
So a combination of professional support
Yeah,
plus peer support,
yeah.
and the peer support needs to be identifiable at the station.
Yeah, it is, Your Honour, yeah.
And it needs to be someone removed, a peer,
Yeah.
but someone removed from the incident.
Oh, I agree,
that
yeah.
has
But is
been
known
arranged.
to the officers.
But
Yeah.
So there could have been someone else better placed
Yeah.
than you to provide peer
Yeah.
support because you're part of the incident. So someone who's still a peer but not part of the incident.
Yeah.
And someone should be managing that so that
Yeah.
everybody knows
Yeah.
and can be assured that the members that they're worried about are in fact receiving the
Yeah,
support
and looked
that
after.
they
Yeah.
deserve.
And I was also mindful about, like, I hadn't met Zach's parents until obviously after that. And they are lovely people. And you could just think, I don't know how, you mean, how they must have felt, like, to know that son would have went through this tragic incident and that that if he hadn't been getting support, I don't know how they would have felt at the time. Because they live all the way in Canberra, so. But yeah, I think we could definitely do better on it.
And is it the situation that in this scenario there were 5 people very directly involved,
Yeah,
and of course others
yeah,
less directly involved, all of whom inevitably would have had their own experience of the trauma and their own vulnerabilities,
yeah,
and you were conscious that there was a need to look after them as best could be done given the resources and the practices of the time.
definitely, yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I don't
Mr.
know. I've
Coleridge?
been told that Mr. Sutner does.
Mr. Sutner, sorry. Are you
Thank you. Thank you for remembering me, Your Honour. Is it appropriate that I question now, or?
Yes, I think the officer would prefer any final questions now, so that he can have lunch without thinking that he has to return.
Thank you, Your Honour. Senior Constable, my name is John Sutner, and I represent Sergeant Bowens. Over the last 4 days, I have heard the evidence before yours of Constables Ebel, Hawkins, Kirstenfeld and Donaldson, and I asked them a series of similar questions and received from them a series of similar answers. I'm going to put mostly similar questions to you. First, I want to ask you about a proposition that has been advanced, that there is a culture of racism in the Northern Territory Police Force, and more particularly the IRT. Is that a correct picture of the IRT?
No, it's not, Your Honour.
And are you aware of the series of text messages that were extracted from Constable Rolf's telephone?
I am aware of them, yes.
Yes, because you are also aware that those text messages form a substantial basis for the advancing of that proposition of racism. You're aware that that is the contention?
Yeah, I'm aware of the text messages, yeah.
Yes. Now, you are also aware that those text messages were extracted from Constable Rolf's phone for purposes of his criminal trial?
Yes.
And are you aware that Sergeant Bowens, Constable Rolf, and several of your other colleagues fought tooth and nail to avoid those text messages being produced at this inquest?
Sorry, I didn't.
He's asking whether you were aware that there was an objection to those text messages being received during the course of the inquest.
Yes, I think I was aware of them, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And did you agree with Sergeant Bowens and the others that the text messages should be kept out?
Your Honour, I'm not sure.
Sorry, Mr. Sutner, there's might be
There's
an
been
objection.
an objection. There are a couple of bases for the objection, Your Honour. First, each of the objections that were made, including by Sergeant Bowens, has been dismissed. The law in the Northern Territory, as it stands, is that those objections were misconceived. It is not appropriate for fringe theories about the law to be put to a witness in circumstances where the law as it stands is that the messages could lawfully be received and that it was appropriate that they lawfully be received. So it is a little disingenuous to say that objections were taken on legal bases
When they've actually been ruled on.
dismissed.
And not only that, Your Honour, it's treading very close to discussions that may or may not have taken place between this witness's legal representatives and himself. And whatever his views are about what Your Honour's ruling might have been before it was made, and whatever his views are about Your Honour's ruling since it has been made, are of no assistance whatever to this court in our respectful submission.
Mr. Suttner, if that's where the questions are going, they're disallowed, but you are allowed to ask him the similar kinds of questions that you asked of the other witnesses about whether he's familiar with that kind of language, whether it's something he's heard or witnessed.
Your Honour, Your Honour preempted me with respect when you said if that's where the questions are going, they are disallowed. Firstly, this is not where it's going. I'm not seeking to challenge Your Honour's ruling. Second, Your Honour, where I come from, we are very, very hesitant before we accuse our colleagues of being disingenuous. And third, I have not yet sought to brief privilege. So I am not going to any question of attempting to upset Your Honour's ruling, nor have I asked the witness for his legal view of your ruling, and nor have I used the word legal. I'm asking him factual questions.
Perhaps, Your Honour, given that we're having an argument about relevance, Mr. Suttner could articulate the relevance of the question. Where is it going?
Are you able to assist us, Mr. Suttner?
Your Honour, the best way will be through, I have about 4 questions. So in the context of the time that this Coronial is taking, I would have been finished those questions by now already.
What is just tell me what the next question is, Mr. Suttner.
I want to know whether this witness was in favour of these questions, and I can't tell you what the next question is until I get his answer. If his answer is that he was in favour,
I'm not going to allow that question, because whether he was in favour or not, the ruling has been made, and his opinion is not going to assist me in relation to any findings that I can make. But you can ask him in the same way that you've asked the other witnesses whether or not he's heard or shares similar attitudes or uses similar language.
as it pleases you, Your Honour. Senior Constable, are you a member of the Northern Territory Police Association?
I am.
And is it your view, and I'm not asking you a legal question, I just want to know of you, is it your position that members of the Northern Territory Police Force have an interest in these coronial proceedings?
I object, Your Honour, on the ground of relevance. Whatever his views are in respect to such matters cannot assist you in any way.
Yes, I'm not going to allow that, Mr. Suttner.
As it pleases you, Your Honour. All right. Senior Constable, can I accept then that other than what we have seen of the text messages, you deny the existence of a culture of racism in the ILT?
Yes, I have.
And did it exist in the police force stationed in Alice Springs?
Does a culture of racism exist in the police forces? That was asking me. No, it's like the
Yes.
United Nations over there, Your Honour. It's just people from all walks of life and countries.
How long have you known Sergeant Bowens?
6 years.
Have you ever heard a racist remark from him?
No, apart from making Irish jokes, that's probably it.
Yes. And those were made to you.
Yeah.
Have you ever observed racist behaviour from him?
No, never.
Have you ever seen him behave disrespectfully to Indigenous people or any other people?
No, quite the opposite. When we used to go on RRT jobs, if anyone had a Land Cruiser in the front of the house, he used to get out and talk to the locals for half an hour. So that used to be frustrating because I'd always want to do something different. But
And is your position the same as the other policemen to whom I've referred? And that is that Sergeant Bowen is a committed, passionate, diligent and professional member of the police force?
Sergeant Bones probably the best sergeant I've ever had.
Yes. No further questions.
Nothing arising.
No, Your Honour, just for the record, Your Honour, the text messages that I put to the witness concerning the ACTS messages have now been marked MFIKK, and the debrief messages have now been marked LL, but that's all.
MFIL.
And MFILL.
Thank you. Thank you for
Thank you,
coming
Anna.
along to give your evidence, Senior Constable. Every perspective adds to our knowledge, as does yours, so we appreciate the evidence that you've given.
Thank you.
Given the time, we'll come back at 2:15.
All stand. The Coronial Court now stands temporarily adjourned.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
One page to another.
Yeah.